So there's a difference between understanding something and knowing it. This full moon in Sagittarius is not just about answers, it's about meaning. And I'm not talking about the kind that is defined through certainty. You see, we're at an interesting moment in time where we get to pause amongst the chaos and dissonance and shift away from the mind trying to define things, label things, solve things, and come more into a state of emotional presence and to actually feel what might be true. See, it's not about what was true or what should be true, but what is actually present for us right now. The full moon in Sagittarius is bringing us into this landscape of what might be true for us energetically and emotionally now. Okay, so I'm going to jump straight into the aspects for this full moon. Starting by looking at the sun in Gemini at 20 degrees, the moon in Sagittarius at 20 degrees, and they're actually forming a square to the lunar nodes, right? Virgo, Pisces. This is a karmic crossroads that me, you, and the collective is currently at the moment. And you'll probably be able to identify this as we go through this actual video. What the square is representing, right, what it's reflecting is an attempt to reconcile the Gemini qualities with our Sagittarius qualities. So how I overly intellectualize the truth, how I form and gather data and try to figure out things from an intellectual space, to a shift towards understanding what is my individual truth, right? What is the truth that is present for me? How do I see the truth? What is my truth? The square to the nodes implies that we're not trying to separate these two parts, but actually find a connection of how they integrate and balance within ourselves. So I wrote it down over here. It says, this signature of the sun and moon in Gemini Sagittarius is to soften the loop of analysis and to let something more honest emerge. Gemini Sagittarius is the way that we define our truth, how we live our truth, and ultimately that truth is shaped by the meaning that we give our lives. This signature is a crossroads, a dilemma that we're all faced between how do we navigate this world with the information that we have externally versus the need to awaken an inner knowing. So this next aspect is a pretty powerful one, and it will echo into the future for us individually and also for the collective for a long time. And I'm talking about the conjunction that's taking place between Jupiter and Mercury. In fact, this is what is called a new phase conjunction. And it's happening in the sign of Cancer, right? We know that Jupiter has moved into the sign of Cancer. And so we are at the precipice for a new story, a new mental story to begin unfolding for us, right? We're ready to start a new emotional loop of what we consider to be the truth for ourselves on an individual level. And I'm sure many of you have come to that point within yourself where you're ready to allow what is emotionally true for you to also influence how you find meaning and navigate this world. When we have a new phase conjunction, and by the way, just a quick little observation, the sign Jupiter, or the planet Jupiter, and the sign Sagittarius are connected. We actually have the moon in Sagittarius. Mercury, the planet associated with Gemini, we have the sun in Gemini. So this new phase conjunction that's happening with Mercury and Jupiter is also deeply influencing and connecting to the sun and moon opposition, right? This full moon. So it's very clear that the significance of this full moon is deeply associated with this new phase conjunction. Now, this energy itself, this new phase conjunction energy, is setting the tone for an entirely new script, as I said. And it's not asking for a massive thesis of information and gathering of knowledge and etc. It is asking for something pretty simple: emotional presence, emotional awareness. What is alive for me right now? Without that fundamental component, it doesn't matter what you understand or think about with Saturn in Aries and Neptune in Aries, because you can't take up space on an emotional level and lead into this new world if you don't know where you are yourself. So this is a return to the body. This is a return to internal dialogue. And the Cancer archetype invites us to collapse into that emotional space. I wrote over here, I said, you may not notice yourself, or you may notice yourself trying to explain things that don't need explaining, or reach for old words that don't fit the new feeling. This is a classic tendency that happens when two planets are in a conjunction, particularly a new phase, because we are aware of the old, but the new has not formed yet to the point where we can actually verbalize what it is that's present with us. So this is an opportunity to let this be a signal for you to know that the language is still forming, and it is from within where this is originating. Allow it to unfold in its natural and organic way, but just be emotionally present with what is alive for you. Okay, so I want to bring some attention to a planetary aspect that, to be honest, probably doesn't want to be exposed, but I'm going to do it anyway because we need to. I'm talking about Pluto in Aquarius and its relationship to Jupiter and Mercury in Cancer. Okay, these planets are in a quincunx aspect, right? An inconjunct. It's like a blind spot. We can't really see it. It's pretty awkward, and they can't see each other. And so what this aspect is doing for us on an evolutionary perspective is it's prompting the need to see that Pluto is reshaping the internal structure, emotional structure within yourself. And it's asking you to see the Jupiter-Mercury aspect as where the path forward is. Like, how do you move from the emotional shock of the old structures into the new structure that feels safe for you? And so because these two planets don't really see each other, we don't see that we're probably experiencing some shakeups, some disturbances, some changes, some eruptions within our lives. And that's bringing emotional attention to things. And so we have this feeling of wanting to move into a new space. And we need to do that. But we might also be prompted by Pluto to understand that there are certain external structures or institutions or internal structures that need updating or that need to be reorganized in order to support and hold this new energetic emotional field. So it's a pretty powerful aspect, but as I said, one that's just in the corner over there, sneakily pulling the strings, but not wanting to bring a lot of attention to it. Okay, so staying with the patterns of things wanting to stay foggy and hidden, we take a look at the Saturn and Neptune conjunction. So for those of you that follow evolutionary astrology, this is a balsamic phase conjunction, okay? And they're actually forming the squares to Jupiter and Mercury. Now, as you know, Jupiter and Mercury are in a new phase conjunction. So this is an interesting kind of dilemma that's set up here between these planetary systems. Now, the Saturn and Neptune cycle is actually a cycle that takes 36 years to complete. And so we're at the end of a 36-year cycle regarding Saturn and Jupiter's planetary system. And so what does Saturn and Jupiter really represent? Well, it represents the way that any form or structure, civilization, community, organization, job, institution, anything that is formed into our world that we see and interact with and define, this will be Saturn. And the Neptune piece will say, well, what is the meaning in this thing that we've created? So as we arrive to this subtle and yet incredibly powerful ending cycle, we are prompted to be present with that which is in a state of decay regarding the things that we've built in the past, and especially the last 36 years. So we're at this critical moment where Saturn and Jupiter has brought us to, Saturn and Neptune has brought us to the end of collective meaning in everything that we've built and everything that we define. And the square to Jupiter and Jupiter and Mercury says we're also simultaneously at the precipice of an entirely new story that wants to be experienced, lived, and then eventually written. So this intersection, this tension square between the new beginnings that is emerging from the Jupiter-Mercury and the collapse and decay of everything that has been before, leaves us in a very peculiar space. It leaves us in a space that I can only describe as, imagine that you were shipwrecked, right? You were on a ship, there was chaos, Neptune, Saturn, your ship was destroyed, Saturn, and you were washed up onto sea. And ahead of you is the Jupiter-Mercury experience. You look forward into this existence with bewilderment, like confusion, like where am I? What are you trying to make sense of things? And you're present with the fact that there is a new story that will eventually unfold for you. And yet at the same time, you're also present with what has come before and what has ended and what you cannot go back to. So again, looking at this signature here, especially with Neptune and Saturn being the focus, this is a time where it's easy to try to fill in the blanks. It's try to remove the fogginess on the uncertainty of things because it's uncomfortable. But I'm actually urging you to be more present with the things that are uncertain, to be present with the fogginess, not because it is a state that you should suffer in or that we should suffer in, but more in the sense that the new forms have not emerged yet. They're very primal, they're very organic, and the more that we try to rush things into existence and add story to it, the more we're going to miss the potential for Neptune to provide us with that spark of inspiration that will eventually lead what will be defined going forward for me and for you. Okay, so transits that don't actually need any introduction are making themselves incredibly present and loud, and that is the Mars and Uranus square at the moment, and the Pluto-Venus square. There's two outer planets that are forming relationships to inner planets. So we're going to feel the impact and the weight of what these evolutionary planetary systems are all about. Now, what is for certain is that the ground is shaking, right? These planetary systems are pushing through strong emotion that will feel threatening to our identities, that will feel threatening to what feels safe and what you know to always be consistent and true. And that is the feature of these aspects. It's an evolutionary push to leap out of the old and get ready to start embodying and living in the new. So I could even assign it to be the very cause of the shipwreck that I described in the previous segment of this video. These planetary systems are saying, now, this is the future, and that's why it's so important to see the transition from this intellectualized data capturing space and into more what is emotionally present and real for you. Because this energy is bringing you into that sobering state. Now, what you might notice is where you are moving towards emotional truth and where you might still be connected to old emotional patterns. Right? That intersection between what is liberation and what is holding you back from fear, whatever emotion that needs to be processed in order to liberate you to move forward into this new space. So if I were to collapse all of the transits into a singular awareness, I'd say that this full moon comes with tremendous pressure, not for action, but for emotional honesty. This full moon is not seeking to push for certainty, but for emotional presence. It's the ability to recognize what is ending around you internally and what is wanting to emerge in a completely new way. What is fresh, what is ready, and to notice that even that language of what is wanting to emerge might not be fully formed yet, and to be okay with that. To recognize that we are at a state of huge transition, a shift into a new paradigm, a new way of living. And everything is still under construction at the moment. And to be present and to be honest with what is emerging from you. We don't need to figure this whole thing out. You just need to be aware and to be witnessing of what changes are taking place in your life right now. If you've been walking through this shift and you've been feeling the tension between what is ending and what's quietly beginning, we've actually created something for you. The Living Your Shift is now open. And this is our live journey that is designed to support those who are currently in this personal and collective transitionary period. It's a space that invites you to slow down and to reconnect with your internal rhythm. And it is a space and a place that is going to allow you to find that centeredness amongst all of the change that's taking place. And what's exciting about this is that Jennifer and I will actually be co-teaching this experience. And this is something that we're incredibly excited for and we've been wanting to do for a long time. And this is for those that want to come into a reconnection. This is not about offering quick fixes, but a place of integration. So if this feels right for you and you want to learn more about what it is that we're talking about, I'm going to leave a link in the description below. You can check all about it over there. And we hope to see you in the Living Shift journey.